Welcome to Building My Legacy podcast. This podcast is designed for leaders and entrepreneurs who want to leave a legacy and will provide strategies that focus upon key elements for legacy creation, determining your desired impact and its benefit, increasing your legacy's reach by engaging key stakeholders, planning, prioritizing, and executing. Here's your host, Dr. Lois Sonstegard.
Welcome, everybody, to today's Building My Legacy podcast. I have with me today Corey Berrier. He is a sales coach. He has a company called The Sales CEO, and he works with organizations to really build and develop their sales teams and sales efforts. So, Corey, sales is a big thing. If you're in a company, you've got to build sales. If you're an individual selling your various wares online, you've got to do sales. If you're a leader that's moving on to building legacy, that's going to be sales. So tell us a little bit about your journey in coming to the point of being a sales consultant.
Sure. So, well, first of all, thank you for having me on. And secondly, to answer a question, I've always been really good with people, and I've always been able to connect either with people or connect people with people. And so, the way I look at sales is everything that we do is sales, whether it's I'm talking to my daughter about eating her vegetables, so to speak, or if I'm talking to the mail person about, holding my mail, right? It's all it's all persuasion. It's all sales, really.
It is all sales, isn't it?
It is. It is. Without a sale, nothing happens.
Okay, so walk us through. Where are some of the biggest challenges people have?
It's interesting that you ask. It blows my mind sometimes but I'll tell you, it's obstacles. People struggle with obstacles. And here's the other thing that people are struggling with right now is getting on Zoom calls. And so right now, if you're not capable or confident enough to get on a Zoom call, your business is going to struggle. And I work with folks right now that they have an awful time trying to get on Zoom, just which I think is really simple. But to answer your question, objections and rebuttals are the biggest thing people have trouble with. So
talk about that a little bit. Objections, yes. So what is it that's difficult about that?
So lots of times people, if they say, let's just say, let me use a service company that I work with, right? It's a plumbing company. They've got like 18 or 19 guys. And maybe the client will say, hey, just give me your prices. And the plumber or the tech will say, well, I've got to go through a couple of things to tell you in order to give you the price. Well, just give me the price. And so so what happens is the person, the tech, just hands over the price. And the problem with that is you haven't built the value in order to give them the price, one. And two, if they're selling, let's just say a hot water heater, I'm just using that as a general example, and maybe they range between $200 and $3,000. Well, if I haven't asked you the right questions, I don't know what hot water heater you need. Maybe you've got 7 people in your house and the hot water runs out after the second person. That means you need a bigger water heater, right? And so if I don't ask good questions, I can't really serve you the way I need to serve you that's going to be beneficial for you. Right. And it's you that I'm worried about, not me. And so I think lots of times people don't know how to overcome those objections. And really, they need to ask better questions, and they need to ask better questions in a sense that they need to build the value. I mean, they need to build the value. And I don't think people understand that.
So how do you know how to ask the right questions?
Sure. So, this is like building rapport, right? If I walk into your office and I see that you're a Carolina Panthers fan, right? I'm going to say, "Oh, you're a Panthers fan." How, and I'll build that commonality between the two of us. Or I can read your energy. right? If I walk in and you're slumped over, right, and your shoulders are down and you look like you're miserable, and I come in with a ton of energy, I'm probably going to turn that prospect off, right? Because they can't relate to me being super energetic because that's not their personality type. So if you don't know how to read someone's body language, how to read their tonality, it's really hard to connect with people. And that's really where I think a lot of people fail.
Just in reading people.
Absolutely.
So how does reading people give you the ability to ask the right questions?
Sure. So it's all about building rapport is know, like, and trust. So if you're my potential client, you need to know, like, and trust me in order to make a good, educated decision. And the way that happens is I ask questions about you, and I don't talk all the time. And I think a lot of salespeople talk more than the prospect, and that's not. The prospect doesn't want to talk about you; they want to talk about them.
So, in the process of getting started, where do people? So, I think we talk a lot about asking questions, right?
Yeah.
And we hear that, but people don't do it. I think because they don't know how to do it. And will it get me, if I ask a question and it doesn't register with me in terms of what I understand or think that they need, then sometimes there's that disconnect. How do I make this? Where do I go next, right? So is there a way you can kind of look at that so you can build a momentum so you have a conversation?
Yeah. So I think, here, what I think you're referring to is incongruency. So if there's, if I'm saying to you that I'm super excited to see you, but I look like I would rather be somewhere else, the customer or client they read that from you. They can read that you're not really, that you don't believe what you're saying. And so the second part of that is the reason people don't ask is because they're afraid. It's fear-based. It's fear-based, and they're afraid of rejection.
So how do you overcome fear of rejection as a salesperson? Because we know, I think when I first started doing sales, I was told you're going to get 8 rejections for every one yes, right? So when I go visit a client, I'd make a list, 8 visits, number 1. And I go in knowing that maybe it would be a rejection, but if it wasn't, how fabulous, right? But when I left, if it was a rejection, I just put a line through it. I only have 7 more to go through. Right?
Sure. So
it's a mind game.
Bingo. And so here's my question. If you go in thinking this is probably going to be a rejection, but maybe it's a win, I would challenge that and say maybe your mindset's not right? Because you need to go into this thinking this is going to be one of the 2 that I'm going to win, not one of the 8 I'm going to mark through. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, no, it makes a whole lot of sense. What I was trying to say was that we fear rejection, but part of that pushback is a natural pushback. The question is, how do we deal with that pushback? Because the easiest thing to do is to put your head between your legs and leave and go, oh, you know what? Maybe I'm not so good at this, right? And it has maybe not so much to do with you. Maybe it does. It may also have a lot to do with the process and where the other person is and what they need to walk through. So it's that walking through. How do you ask the questions so you get your client to go on the journey with you so they can make a decision?
So great question. Here's a couple of things. So if you say to me, just leave me the pamphlet and I'll call you tomorrow, right? I would say to you, so, usually there's one of two reasons why people don't make a decision. And that could be that, one, you're afraid that maybe you're going to hurt my feelings, or you're afraid to tell me no, right? That could be one of them. And then the second one could be, or should be, maybe you don't have enough information. Maybe I haven't explained it well enough. So Lois, which one of those is it, right? So you give the customer two options, right? It's either one, you're just being polite and you're not willing to tell me no, and that's okay. Or I haven't provided enough information for you to make a decision. Which one of those would you fit into? And so what that does is it puts you back in the power position, so to speak, because then the customer, they're not expecting that, because
right.
most salespeople don't have those tools in their toolbox.
Right. They don't ask that.
Right.
And so let's take the second example. They go, wow, I don't have enough information. Where do you go from there?
So I would have to, depending on what it was I was talking to them about, I would provide them with more information to help them better make a decision. Or maybe I could ask the question, well, what part is it that you have questions about? And let's just take the hot water heater. Is it the size of it? Is it that I didn't explain, how the functionality, and I'm not much on selling on benefits and features. However, a lot of sales folks do sell on benefits and features. And the reality is, if I'm buying an iPhone, I don't need to know everything on the iPhone. I don't need to know everything that it does, because I don't care what everything it does. I need to know what it's going to do for me. And for anybody listening, if you're in sales, you've got to make sure you're speaking to the client in what they're looking for. That's the biggest thing. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question. I think I did.
So tell me, if you're a salesperson and objections are difficult, you back off from them, what advice would you give? How do you overcome that fear so that you can move on and be really successful?
So I'll ask you a question. Why do people go to the gym 5 days a week?
Well, I think for a variety of different reasons. Sometimes they go to meet people. Sometimes they go because they think they should. Sometimes they go because their health plan gives them a deduction if they do, and they'll go and read a book for the hour that they're supposed to be exercising, and then they go home. And sometimes they do it because they want to be physically fit and healthy, and some do it for weight loss. So that's a lot of reasons.
That is a lot of reasons. So most people go to the gym to build muscle, right? To gain more muscle fibers, and they build more muscle by repetition. And so with salespeople, it's the exact same thing. If you're having problems with overcoming objections, you need to practice overcoming objections. And whether that's in the mirror or whether that's with your spouse or a friend, either way, you have to keep going. And it's just like with video. For me, that's how I learned how to be so great on video, is because I did it over and over and over until I got comfortable. And so sales is exactly the same way. You've got to practice those objections and practice what you're going to say when the customer says, I need to talk to my wife, right? You need to have an answer for that. You need to have an objection, because guess what? That's going to happen a lot in sales.
So if you want to be an overnight sales success, formula for that, do you have a formula for that?
So I think it depends on the person. I believe that most salespeople that are really good they're not necessarily made. Usually it comes with your personality type. And if you're in, like, here's an example. I've got an introvert that I work with that's got an amazing piece of software he's designed, but he has no idea how to sell it because he's never really had to deal with people a lot because he's behind the computer. So to become an overnight success in sales, I don't know if there's a formula, to be honest with you. I mean, I've been doing this 25 years, so I don't know if there's really an overnight formula, to be honest with you.
So what for you really allowed you to get past whatever? I mean, none of us are born as salespeople, although children, you might argue, are some of the best salespeople, right? They don't give up. They persevere until they get what they want. But where was it? How did you go about learning sales yourself?
So, well, through various sales jobs. I mean, I've been in sales forever, and I've been in different kinds of sales. So that helps me to be versatile in the sales industry or sales game, whatever you want to call it. But you made a really good point about children, right? They persist, and that is exactly my point to repetition, right? My daughter may ask me 5 times about something, but until she gets it, and it's just persistence. She's overcoming the objection by continuing to ask, right? And you have to do that in an elegant way.
What's really creative about them is if you don't respond one way, they have a way of asking in a different way, right? Which is, so please go on. But it's that differentness that makes it work.
Right. They change the approach, right? They change if I say, hey, you can't have a cookie till after dinner, and she asks me every day, 5 minutes before dinner, can she have a cookie? Maybe she asks in a different way each time. Maybe it's, hey, I did X, Y, and Z today. Do you think I can have my cookie at 5 minutes before dinner? That could be one way. Or she could say, hey, I got my report card in the straight A's. Can I have my, it could be a multitude of different things, but you're right. Change your approach if it's not working.
So I want to go back to that question, though. How did you get started? Because I think a lot of people, when they enter, so let's just take a look at people who are leaving a corporate world and they're moving into perhaps building a not-for-profit or some thing that they're wanting to do that will complete the legacy that they want to leave. That's one group of people. Or you may have people who are entering, maybe having a job transition and go, okay, I'm going to move from operations to sales. And so where do you begin? How do you begin? How do you make that mind shift change so that you can enter with more success than failure?
Well, I think that failure is a big part of what builds people. And I will tell you, that has been a big part of my story. I've failed several times. I've lost businesses and then I've sold businesses, and I've done great in some businesses. And then some businesses I haven't done great. And it's trial and error. But to answer your question, if somebody's moving out of corporate into sales, I believe the best way to get really good at sales, and this is the formula that I would use, the more people you talk to and the more hands that you shake, the more business you're going to do. And that's just, it's a numbers game, right? And I personally I will set up 30-minute Zoom calls with people that I don't know. And so I can learn about them, not to pitch them on sales, but so I can let them talk about themselves for a half an hour. And 90% of the time, at the end of that call, they're like, by the way, what does it take to work with you? Right? And because I don't mention it, I don't talk about it. And so that's super important to be mindful of. Think about how you would want to be treated if you were being sold to, right? And put yourself in your customer's shoes. That's the biggest thing that I would say that people need to learn is, it's not about you, it's about the customer, and it's about what they want, not about what you want.
And that's a hard one to get to, right? Because you look at the sales that you need to make personally to stay afloat or to grow, and then you become focused on the numbers instead of really solving a problem for somebody else. You're solving your own problem, not the other's problem.
You're right. You're right. And I will tell you, you're most likely going to hit a brick wall if you go about it that way. And it comes back down to, why are you doing it? Are you getting into sales for the money, or are you getting into sales to help people? There's a big difference there. If you get into sales to help people because you believe in what you're selling, and I don't sell anything that I don't believe in, nor have I ever. And so, you have to figure out the reason why you're doing it, because if you go into it just for the money, people are going to see that and they're going to think you're the quote unquote car salesman. And you don't want to come across that way because it has a bad stigma to it.
I think it's old. And yet it's interesting how much, especially online, is the old salesman mentality, the used car salesman mentality. And you get a lot of pushback if you try it.
Well, think about it. How many times do you get people to say, oh, I want to, I'm a Bitcoin, whatever, Forex, whatever. And that's their first thing that they say to you.
Yeah.
How many times do you delete it? Every single time, because they don't care about you. They don't even know you. They're just sending you a blind direct message. And quite frankly, I think it's insulting.
So if you want to be a champion salesperson, what is your number one recommendation to somebody? You've got some experience, you know what you're doing, and you just really want to knock it out of the park.
The biggest tip that I can give you is build rapport with your client or customer. Learn about them. Learn what they like. Listen. And when I say listen, it may sound like, but actively listen. And here's the difference, right? If I'm actively listening, then that means I'm listening to everything that you're saying without thinking what I'm going to say next. Because if I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next, I'm not really listening to you.
That is so true, isn't it? And I think when we're insecure or we are afraid of quotas or so-called failure, that I'm not going to meet the targets that I'm expected to, we tend to run scripts in our mind as to how we can sell rather than how we can be compelling to the other individual. So I think it's so true. Some of the biggest mistakes you've seen people make.
I think I would say the biggest mistake salespeople make is they don't qualify who they're talking to. And what I mean by that is they don't ask. It goes back to asking really good questions, and it still circles back to being interested in your client, not interesting, right? You don't want to be interesting. You want to be interested, because your client wants you to be interested in them, not interesting, right? And so I think a lot of people fail when they at that point. I really do believe that is the chokehold in fear. And it comes down, and it all dwindles down to, I don't know if I can make this sale with you because I'm not confident, right? And I've dealt with that. And salespeople still, I've been doing sales forever, and I still deal with fear from time to time, for sure. If you've got a massive deal on the line, I think it's only natural to think this is going to suck if it falls through,
Yeah. That is so true. We create our own little pressure box and then hope that the world will respond or not notice, perhaps. And when we're not confident, everybody knows.
Yes. Goes back to the incongruency, right? 1,000% it does.
So, Corey, we are almost at the end of our podcast. And so things we've missed, things that you think the audience should know about, what might that be?
I would say, some of the most important things that we've talked about, and I don't know that we've missed anything right off the top of my head, but you need to learn how to build rapport. And again, let me go back through that. In building rapport, this is actually something I did miss. Let me break building rapport down for you really quick. So when you're building rapport, there's 3 parts to that, okay? There's body language, which means how you're standing, if you're moving your hands, your facial expressions. That's 55% of how people communicate. Here, the second part of that is tonality. That's 38%, I believe it is 37 or 38% of how people communicate. So if you do the math there, that's like 93% of communication. The words that you use are 7%. So think about this. If you get an email from me, you're literally missing 93% of the communication that you need to have. So that's why I believe video is so amazing, because I can transfer my energy to you through video without being in front of you, because you can see my energy. You can see my body language. You can see my facial expressions. And that is so important. I mean, that is the foundation to building good relationships, not just in sales, but in general.
That is so true, rapport, and we talk about it glibly, and yet it is that basic foundation, isn't it, on which everything else is built. What else? Anything else that you would like to leave with the audience before we complete for the morning?
Just be authentic. Don't come across as salesy, because people don't like that, because they categorize you as the used car salesman. And if they do that in their mind, if that's where they go, you're probably not going to pull them out of that.
That is so true. It is so true. Corey, you have been wonderful. Thank you. I think this is such an important issue, and so many people struggle with it. So thank you for your thoughts on this. And for those of you who are listening to Building My Legacy podcast, we will have information about Corey in the show notes, so you can get in contact with him if you would like to do so. And if you need some additional help getting in contact, just let us know and we'll be glad to do that for you. And then please also remember to visit our website, www.buildtomorrow.com, and all of our social media sites, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, which is Build Tomorrow with the number 2. So thank you so much, Corey, for being with us. And thank you for listening to Building My Legacy podcast.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
You've been listening to Building My Legacy podcast with Dr. Lois Sonstegard. To book your appointment with Dr. Sonstegard, visit www.buildtomorrow.com.